Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar on happiness and its relationship with information. I'm Karen Miller, the Program Coordinator for SIGED, and it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Naresh Agarwal. Naresh is an assistant professor at the Graduate School of Library and Information Science at Simmons College in Boston, and he's the winner of the 2012 James N. Crestis Award and the current Deputy Director of the ASIS Chapter Assembly. And I've been privileged to work with Naresh, particularly while he was chair of SIGED, so I know you're going to enjoy his presentation. So Naresh, with that, I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Karen. It's my pleasure to speak to all of you on one of my favorite topics on happiness and how it might relate with information. So we're going to talk more about happiness and less about information, but we'll have some time to ponder and think through. So we're going to talk about two things. One is basically a model of happiness, and I'm going to arrive at the model by talking about my 7 commandments in life. I call them commandments, but they're really life lessons, values that I've learned over time and which I try to remind myself and which I find very practical. And one thing I want to tell you about these commandments is that they are more for our own use, for our personal use, and not so much for telling other people. And you'll understand why as we go through them. And towards the end, we'll also talk about how happiness might be related to information. So before we get to each of the 7 commandments, I'd like you all to take a pause, at this moment and take a minute to think what happiness means to you. And if you could type that in the chat box as to what when you think of happiness, what do you think? Okay, home, family, freedom, what else? What else do you think of when you think of happiness? Physical and mental well-being, quiet, light feeling in your heart, peacefulness, security, secure future, maintaining calmness, love, family, in relation to accomplishing something, relaxation, so you see, happiness means many different things to many of us. And an overriding theme in many of this, as you see, sincere friends, future, love, peace, well-being, we all seem to take a long-term view of happiness as we answer this question of what happiness might mean to us. And yet at the same time, we let ourselves be affected by a lot of things on a daily basis, or we postpone happiness to the future when we say that we'll be happy when we get something, or we'll be happy when something happens or something does not happen. So the very idea of, when we talk about the idea of pursuit of happiness, as it is in the Declaration of Independence, I do ponder about the word pursuit, and by using the word pursuit, are we postponing happiness so that we are always sort of chasing it rather than having it at any point in time? So when we think of the idea of happiness, one of the things we must think of is that happiness is a decision that we need to make, and that decision needs to be made with the things that we have in life and the things that we do not have in life, with things that are going well and with things that are not going well. Because life at any given point in time for any one of us is a series of dualities. You have all the right things going and you have some not so nice things happening. You have a lot of loving people, and you have some people who we don't get along with, or who we think that may or may not like us, or we have some things that are going well. So it's a combination of disease, suffering, sickness, as well as a lot of laughter and happiness and productivity and a lot of nice things happening at the same time. So the first commandment that I have is be happy always, no matter what, and don't let events, good or bad, disturb your state of bliss. So here, somewhere in the center, it's you that you see over here, and then you have all these words, the nice words that people tell us, all the love and the sunshine and the good events happening, and all the smiles that we receive in any given day. And then we have the thunder and the lightning and the clouds, the not so nice words or not so nice events. And we are here somewhere in the center. Now I use the image of a lotus because a lotus grows on water, and sometimes the water is dirty or murky, and yet the lotus is able to stay above water. And that's a kind of thing that we can learn to see ourselves as well. So rather than being a participant in the events of our life, we can look at ourselves as an observer. Because a lot of times when we see other people and their problems, they seem much smaller to us than when we see our own problems, because we learn to magnify them and make them bigger than what they actually are. So if we learn to be like a lotus, or look at our life as an observer, we'll be able to see that problems will always be there at any given point in time, and we will only look at it as that it's a part of life, and people generations and centuries ago had those, and people generations down the line are also going to have those problems. So here, on the one side you have the desirable words or events, and on the other side you have the undesirable words or events. So typically when things are going well and things are going the way we want them to be, then we smile, or sometimes we laugh out loud. And when things do not happen the way we want them to be, then we get sad. Now emotions and feelings are very essential to being human. So there's nothing wrong in the range of emotions that we feel. But at the same time, as we feel those emotions, it's important to remind ourselves that this too shall pass, that it's a passing phase, and good things are followed by not so nice things, and not so nice things are followed by nice things. So it goes as a cycle. So this commandment is especially important for times when, during the difficult times that we feel, that this is going to pass as well as all those happy or not so happy moments pass as well, because time is the only thing that's constantly moving. So this would be a theoretical ideal state to reach, where we are able to take the nice things with equanimity as well, and then we are able to take the not so nice things with equanimity as well. So this idea is called the idea of sameness. It's very difficult to achieve, but it could be worth aspiring for, or at least reminding yourself that everything is a passing phase. So to look at it in terms of a research model, so here we have an external environment, and we have the words and the events which affect our happiness. And then based on these words, there's some sort of a reaction, and we have an internal reaction. Now this external environment is actually like a glass half full. where there are the nice things and not so nice things both happening at the same time. But what really matters is the pair of glasses we choose to wear. If we choose to wear the happy pair of glasses, we'll see the full side of things. And if we choose to wear the unhappy pair of glasses, we'll choose to see the unhappy side of things. So the glass is what is it? What it is. It is half empty or half full, whichever way we want to look at it, or maybe completely full, half filled with air and half with water. But so what really matters is our perspective or how we choose to see that. And based on our internal reaction, this has a moderating effect on our happiness. So while we have no control over the external environment, we have no control over the things that happen in our lives or what other people tell us, but we have a great control over how we choose to react to it. So the choice in being able to react to a specific set of words or a situation is a very important choice, and that has a big bearing on our happiness. And this is what is the most important thing to realize, that we are very, very powerful in choosing to react or not to react in a particular way. And especially in workplaces, I found that if someone says something insensitive to you, and if you choose not to react at that moment, it can actually be very, very good for you in the long run, and not in workplaces as well as in relationships as well. So because at that point in time, if you say something nasty and reply to something nasty or insensitive, then two people need to work on forgiveness. But if one person says something nasty and then we choose not to react to it, then only one person needs to work on forgiveness. So you can spend the next few days trying to forgive the person. And what really happens is that a lot more than the words themselves, we spend much more time dwelling on people's words than the words themselves. Because if you notice, words are nothing. They are just pieces of information. And yet, sometimes people spend lifetimes holding grudges or saying that that person said that to me, or that person didn't say that to me. And by holding those things, right, we try to see intention behind people's words. And if we just see them as purely words, we will find that we are much more lighter inside. So this internal reaction has a direct bearing on our happiness, and it also gives rise to an external reaction. So the choice to whether to react externally, to say something back or not, depends on what we are feeling inside at that point, or how we are choosing to react to a given situation. And based on this, we actually are able to affect the external environment. So if we say something bad in return, then the environment can be bad, can become bad as well. But if we choose not to react, then we are actually saving the environment from spreading unhappiness around. The second commandment is having zero expectations from every other person in the world and 100% from yourself. When you don't expect, you'll never be unhappy, and everything you get is a bonus. Now the numbers 0 and 100 might seem very difficult over here, so we might want to replace that with minimum and maximum. Having minimum expectations from everyone, minimum and maximum from ourselves. Now, John F. Kennedy once famously said that ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Similarly, when it comes to relationships, if we are able to ask ourselves as to what we can do for people, and not what people can do for us. And when I say people, in this case, I'm talking about our spouse, our child, our parent, our friend, our co-workers, everyone we interact with or live with or work with, all those people, for every other person. So most of the time, I realize that the feelings of hurt that we have is because we feel that we did something for some person or some people a lot, and we feel that we did not get enough appreciation for it, or sometimes our expectations are not met. So the fault, I realize, lies not with the people, but our expectations from them. We always get what we deserve, just that the source might be different. We might be getting it from some other person, but we expect it to get from one particular source. So rather than going into a futile exercise of trying to change people all the time, when we say that he should be doing this way, or she should be doing this or behaving in this manner or that manner, if we accept people for what they are, so when we look at these two phrases, what she is versus she should be, or he is versus he should be. So the difference between is and should be is a huge difference. And whenever we say should be, we are trying to look for a state which is not there. But the moment we accept the is state the way anyone is, and at that moment it becomes much more simpler for us to accept, because trying to change somebody is one of the most difficult things and to do. The only way we can change people is by changing ourselves. So again, you have the expectation, which might be external or internal, and having some external expectation from other people leads to some event or an outcome, and also leads to work. If I expect my students to do something, they do put in the work to do the assignment on time. So it does lead to work. And but if I base my happiness on what somebody does or does not do, then that has a negative bearing on my happiness. But if my expectation is only from the work, from what the work that I put in, then that gives rise to an internal reaction, and that has a direct bearing on our happiness. So as long as we see work as our own reward, we will be happy. But if we base our happiness on the event or outcome, that has a negative bearing on happiness. The third commandment is on comparison. Never compare with those around you. Just give in your 100% and don't worry about the results. Comparison is one of the most dangerous things that we do routinely all the time. And I teach a course in evaluation where I teach students to compare, where you are comparing your library with other peer libraries, or your institution with other institutions, or against a set of criteria or benchmarks. So when we want to improve, if we have to compare, we should compare with standard things. But if we compare with people, most of the time we might end up disappointed. To cite a personal example, when I was in high school, I used to score 100 in math most of the times, and if I ever lost 1 point, my sisters would ask me what happened, where did that 1 point go? And there was at one time when I was in the 9th or 10th grade, when a girl from the other section came to my class, and we both started competing. And at one such time, she scored an 85 or an 86 in a math test, and I think I scored an 86 or an 87, a point more than her. And I was very happy because I thought that I beat her and I scored more than her. And after that, I started thinking that what has really happened to me. On the one hand, I used to be unhappy when I scored a 99, and here I was happy just because I scored 1 point more than her. So this is what comparison does to us. It actually helps us, forces us to lower our standards or to what we are capable of doing. So if you think about it, right, each of us are living our lives as individuals. We are born alone and we die alone. And even if we are dying amongst people, it is a personal journey that we are living. So by comparing with other people, we are not really being fair to ourselves, because, and an easy way to decide is that we pick and choose the good things in people's lives, whereas we don't accept their lives as packages. So if we take people's lives as a package with the good things and not so good things, and if you ask yourself, that would you want to exchange your life with that person's, and almost always you'll find that you're happy with the way your life is, and you do not want to exchange it with anyone else's. So comparison it really helps us become unhappy. So if we have to be happy, we have to stop comparing. That's a foremost thing, and we have to be careful as parents or teachers as that we don't compare our family members or our children with other children or with other parents, but encourage the person or the child to be the best of what he or she can be or wants to be. So comparison actually leads to external expectation, which has a negative effect on our happiness. And it also has a negative effect on our internal reaction with feelings of inadequacy or jealousy, and that has a negative bearing on happiness as well. And the fourth commandment is perhaps one of the most controversial, that everything happens for one's own good. and we get what is best for us. Now, some people like to say this as everything happens for a reason. When we're thinking about everything in this case, right, it is more to do with the relationships in our lives, and not so much about world events. When we see the bad things happening, there was a student of mine who said that I don't need to be told that something is good. I can accept things as horrible because horrible things happen, and I can accept them. I don't need to be told that they are good, and which is fine. Whether we accept things as horrible or good or bad, things are what they are, and all of these things. When we say good, right, we are really using really using a phrase in this case where we say that okay, something is good or something is bad. When we go to a lake, and when we say that the lake is beautiful, or someone might say that it's just water. The lake is what it is, and whether we choose to see it as beautiful or not does not take away from what the lake is. So similarly, when events happen in a life, by choosing to see them as good, it might make things easier for us at some times. To cite another example for this commandment, my wife, she is a physician at Carney Hospital in Boston, and before we came to the U.S., we lived in Singapore for many years. So for 3 years or so after we got married, my wife was trying to get a job in Singapore as a doctor, but they did not accept Indian medical degrees, and she had a difficult time for 3 years trying to find a job. And after those difficult times, she decided to pursue an exam for a medical residency in the U.S. So it was a series of exams where each phase required preparations of up to 6 months, and she came to the U.S., took 26 flights, and after 2 years of trying, she finally got into a residency program in New York City, and today she is attending in a hospital in Boston. And when she thinks about all the times in Singapore, she's actually very, very glad that she could not get a job there. Otherwise, she feels that she might have settled into the life there, and she might have missed out on one of the best trainings in the world that she was able to receive when she came here. And I'm very thankful as well today, because had she been able to get a job in Singapore, I might have continued to stay there, and I might not have come to the U.S. Or might not be giving this talk today as a faculty in Simmons College as I'm giving to you right now. So in your own personal lives as well, you might be able to think of many things which might seem difficult at any given point in time, but it all makes sense, or it all works out in the long run. So again, you have the external environment with events and words, and which gives rise to the internal reaction, and which has an effect on our happiness. So what really is an important moderator over here is time. So in the short term, things might seem difficult or unhappy, but if you take a long-term view, you'll be able to find things much easier. The fifth commandment is perhaps the most important, and this commandment is living the present moment, is not worrying about the future. It will take care of itself, and not worrying about the past because we can never change it. Right here, right now, all of you that I'm speaking to you remotely, and all of you connected from your houses or your workplaces, are the most important people in my life. At this moment, nothing else matters. It might happen that 30 or 40 minutes from now, we all might disconnect, and we all might not be talking to or listening to each other. But right now we are, and that is the moment we have to be thankful for. A lot of times we spend our time in anxiety, worrying about the future, as in what might happen or what might not happen, and we have long to-do lists, and we worry about the multiple things that we need to do. So when if we really think carefully, right, we are living, we are worrying completely in a futile manner by trying to live in the future, because tomorrow will take care of itself if we take care of today. So one strategy is to break down big pieces of tasks that we have, and to know that as long as we are alive, there will always be work to do. I was a student at some point, and then I was working in the industry, and then I went on to doing a PhD. So completing the PhD seemed like a big thing at that point. And then after that, it was finding the job as a faculty member. So that seemed like a big thing at that point. And now I'm in the tenure process, so that seems like a big thing at this point. And I've spoken to faculty who've gotten the tenures, and then again they have a huge level of committee assignments that they have right after that. So your work or the things that you need to do never ends. It just changes. It just becomes different things. So rather than worrying about what will happen or what will not happen, if we just focus on what we can do in any given day or at any given time, we will find that things will be all right. And just before this talk started, Karen was mentioning that the day was that her day had been very difficult, and I was telling her that I'm going to talk about present moment. So only thing that matters is the present moment at this point in time. And 2 or 3 minutes before the talk started, my computer had issues and it was not connecting. So I went and tried logging in from another one, and things worked out all right. But when things are not working out, or when something goes wrong, it is exactly precisely in those moments that you have to realize that we have to focus on only those things which are in our hand at any given point in time, and nothing else. So when we have a meal, there's nothing more important than the meal that we are having. When we are working on an assignment or some work, there's nothing more important than that thing. When you're speaking to someone, there's nothing more important than the conversation at that point. So trying to focus on the present moment will really help us be happy. So here, when we have the external environment, the events and the words, and an awareness about the past, the present, or the future, you'll find that focusing on the present moment really is the key to being happy. The sixth commandment is about doing the impossible. So a lot of the times we have self-doubt, and we feel that we cannot do certain things because we feel that we are not good enough or we are not adequate. And I found a lot of people thinking that they're not good enough. Either they don't something about the ability, or something about the way they look, or something about some adequacy or inadequacy. So people find various reasons to think that they're not adequate enough. And whenever we find greatness around, people who have achieved a lot, when we think about Mahatma Gandhi, or we talk about Barack Obama, or we talk about Nelson Mandela, we talk about Steve Jobs, or any name that comes to our mind, or Mother Teresa, right? These are all ordinary people, and the only thing that made them extraordinary is a belief in themselves that they can do the impossible. And just having that sense of responsibility, which included not just themselves or their families, but something which encompassed a very large number of people, and in some cases the entire world or humanity. So that is what makes all the difference. So one of the things to realize is that not to put these people on a pedestal, but to look at our own lives as extraordinary as well, and to have a sense of responsibility from ourselves, that we are here to make a huge amount of difference, and nothing is a barrier, and nothing can stop us from achieving that. So here, when we look at different people, we find that it's the same lotus, the same bundle of energy which is there inside each one of us. It is just that some people have been able to remove more of the dust, and some people have not been able to. So the more we are able to remove this dust from us, we will find that we are able to achieve the impossible. And sometimes one spark is enough to make us realize this. So again, having this internal expectation is having it from yourself is going to lead to confidence, and it's going to lead to work, and this is a direct bearing on our happiness. And the last commandment, which is perhaps the most difficult, is that for every person that we see, meet, and talk to, imagine that you're seeing, meeting, and talking to God. And the essence is to identify with each person in the world as your own. Now here, you can replace the word God with your favorite person. I would say, again, pause for a moment over here, and try to think of the one person who is the most important to you in your life. And then, when you see the word God over here, replace God with that one person. A student in my class once asked me whether he could replace God with his mother, and I said, yes, you can. And the idea is that, so every time you talk to someone, you see your favorite person in that someone. Every time you're talking to a huge audience or a class full of students or a panelist or a group of people who are interviewing you at a job, you see that you are talking to your favorite person. When that happens, we stop fearing people, and we stop getting conscious, because you feel that you're talking to your favorite people, and you're meeting and interacting with your favorite people all the time, and we start seeing the world as one big family. So this is how the world starts appearing to us at that moment. We have this sense of oneness, which leads to a lack of fear from anyone, and a sense of identification with every single person, and which leads to self-confidence. So combining the 7 models, this was the first one, and then I just rearranged that, and now I'm combining the second one with that, and then combining the third one, and the fourth one of no worries, and fifth one of the present moment, and the sixth one, and the seventh one leads to this sort of a model. But this model has something wrong in it, because when you have a sense of identification with the whole world, then this entire external environment collapses, and it becomes much simpler. But what it actually means is happiness is you. Thank you. So this was the first part of the talk on happiness and my 7 commandments. And I just want to spend a few more minutes talking about how happiness might be related to information. So you'll find that in information science, right, a lot of research has happened in the role of affect or emotion or subjective factors, and people have looked at it with regard to an information-seeking process of people most of the time, and either people's state of happiness, the people's emotions, or the affect they feel before a search, or during a search, or after a search. And some of the studies have been the famous model of information search process by Kultau, and there was a book on information and emotion by Nal and Bilal, which they were published in 2007. Gutzka and Lapotovska, they looked at the idea of objective happiness. So in the search model that they had, they asked the participants that how happy they were at that point, and on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 7, that was just before the search. And in a recent study on collaborative information seeking, happiness was seen in terms of the smiles of participants in the process of information seeking. But is that about it? These were the very few studies that I could find when I looked at the role of happiness in information science research. And you'll find that in most of the literature, that this is largely left out happiness from its purview. And it has left out the study of how information might affect our state of happiness. And especially in psychology and in the growing area of positive psychology, people have found that up to 40% of our happiness is within our power to change. So if we think of happiness as a decision, or if we think of happiness as learning to play the violin, which really takes time and practice until we get it like perfect. And happiness is something like that. So it's something which can be studied and something which can be taught. So the idea of whether happiness can be taught, and if it can be, why has it been left out of the curricula in higher education and in library and information science, is something to think and ponder. So if we compare information and happiness, happiness has various definitions, but I'll choose the one with Ben-Shahar, and it says that happiness is the overall experience of pleasure. And it says that it does not pertain to a single moment, but to a generalized aggregate of one's experiences. So I think this is important, because in the beginning of the talk, when I asked you all to think of what happiness is, most of you took a long-term view of happiness. in the kind of things that when you thought of happiness as love, well-being, and security for the future, all of those things. And when we think of information, so most of the time when we are affected by things, what people say or do not say, it is really the pieces of information that we are affected by. And that is really in line with Bateson's 1972 definition of information, where it says that information is any difference that makes a difference to a conscious human mind. And Brenda Derwin, in her sense-making theory as well, she says that information does not exist in itself. And she says that information is a misnomer if you think that it exists in isolation. Information only exists as it pertains to the difference it makes to a human mind, or the way it affects an individual. So if you think of that, information having the potential to affect an individual has a direct bearing on our sense of happiness or unhappiness that we feel at any given point in time. And a lot of times we choose to live a life as fig leaves. When someone says something, the leaf flies in one direction, and when someone says something else, the leaf flies in the other direction. So we're not very grounded. So this thing about the relationship between happiness and information is something that needs to be investigated further by researchers. The events that are affecting us are very close to the context of information behavior that has been studied heavily in the information science. And a lot of times when we stereotype people, we do that because we fail to establish a sense of shared context with people, and we lack sufficient information about them. But the moment we start having a degree of familiarity with people, at that point in time, we start liking them, or we start accepting them, and the stereotyping vanishes. So if you look at the place of happiness in LIS education, the idea of can happiness be taught is something which needs to be investigated. When Ben-Shahar, he started a course on happiness at Harvard, and he called it positive psychology. There were only 6 students to begin with, and the course grew from 6 to 380 students to then 855 students. So if we can think of various learning outcomes in schools, we have learning outcomes on critical thinking, on leadership, on communication skills, on ethics, and a whole lot of things which we feel that we can teach as students. If those can be taught, and if research has shown that happiness can be taught and can be and is within our power to change, then why aren't learning outcomes in higher education and in LIS schools looking at happiness as well? We could establish centers for happiness in various colleges and universities, and there could be courses showing relationships between information, communication, and happiness. So I think I'll stop for now, and we'll take some questions and discuss. But I really want us all to think about what can we do to make LIS, make happiness more mainstream in LIS research and education. Thank you. And there's a questionnaire for you to fill out, which you can fill. You can note down the URL and fill at the end of the talk. And if you wanted further handouts relating to different commandments, it's there at this website. Thank you. So there was one question saying that there's a risk to contentment. No competition might lead to doing the minimum instead of maximum. Now, these commandments are to be taken in totality. And in the beginning, I mentioned that these commandments are only for ourselves and not for other people. And that's because if someone is going through a difficult time, that person needs a hug at that moment, and not really an advice saying that, oh, you're supposed to be happy always. So it's something to remind us at that. But if you look at contentment, right, and if we compare with the other commandment which was there, which talked about expecting 100% from ourselves. So the expecting 100% from ourselves means that we put in a lot of work because our expectations from only from ourselves. So it's not something that would lead to us doing the minimum, because we are still doing a lot, but we are, rather than to compete, we are just doing it because of the sense of responsibility that we feel for ourselves and the wider world. So it actually leads to more work than less work, because the reasons for work becomes different. Any other questions or comments as well? What is the relationship between happiness, cultural values, and information? And that happiness could differ in different cultural contexts. And that's true, because most of the time, right, it is our idea of, when we talk about the idea of accepting people and situations, we are looking at the idea of accepting differences as well. And when we celebrate these differences, when we celebrate differences, we are really looking at accepting different people and different things. So which also means that so your culture definitely will have an effect in terms of whether you are taught to whether you are taught to accept happiness or not, or how we choose to define happiness. But more than culture, it is also an individual choice as well at many given points in time. So which means that that if a person is choosing to be unhappy, we should let the person make a choice to be unhappy, rather than forcing the people to be happy. Otherwise, the person will become unhappy if we try to do that. So it is something which is it is only for self-introspection and practice, and not so much for other people. So yes, different cultures and different people will view it differently. And one question was, what is LIS? LIS is Library and Information Science. And one comment was that I think 100% of happiness is in our power to change, and not only 40%. And I agree with that. The 40% came from one of the researchers in positive psychology, and she conducted some studies, and she found that she came up with this number of 40%. But even if it is 40%, it's a huge number, and yes, it could be much more than that. The relationship between happiness and religion. Now, again, that is a big question, and what is religion is another big debate. But yes, so spirituality and different religious traditions do help people to find happiness in different means. So if you look at, if we let go of the political side of religion, I think if we are looking at personal religion, then yes, many people find solace through religion, and find happiness through religion as well. And one comment was, is it information part of that external world that we remain happy or not, no matter? So this was looking at the definition of information as whether information is outside us, or whether information is something that we come to contact with. So this is a wider debate on the definition of information, whether if we look at the written word. So here again, if you look at the word written in a book or on a website or something, so in itself it is nothing. It's just pieces of information. It is word. It's how we define it. But so some people look at it as knowledge, or try to distinguish between information and knowledge, and some people choose to define information as something that affects us. But if it is something that affects us, then it is something to ponder about, why is it affecting us. So I think it's a bigger debate on the definition of information as a whole as well, and how it might relate to happiness as well. So there was an interesting question on if I think that Darwin's sense making is equivalent to making someone happy, and if sense is happiness. And I have to tell you, share something about Darwin's sense making. And personally, for me, last year I wrote a paper on making sense of sense making, and for the ASIS History pre-conference. And I was trying to make sense of sense making. What I realized was that it was a huge revelation for me that Darwin's work, I think, is profound for our generation, and I think it's going to have a huge impact because Derwin's sense-making, the primary tenets of sense-making is to celebrate differences, and to, when you're talking to a research participants or in communication, is trying not to impose our points of view or our vocabulary on people, and trying to let people make sense of it themselves. And I think once we understand that tenet, as we try to understand that people are individuals living their lives, trying to make sense of the world, and having something to work on, trying to survive, having multiple identities. And if we see people as those complex people and trying to make sense of all of that, and then some piece of information interacting with a person at a given point in time, we will find that we are able to accept people much more easily, rather than slotting them or stereotyping them into boundaries which are artificial. So I think Derwin's sense-making and my idea of happiness are actually very, very close to each other. So, and if you look at Derwin's website as well, and she says that her favorite people are those that have that have a desire to improve the human condition. So I think having that big sense of desire, that sense of greater responsibility, or an idea of social justice, or improving the human condition, it is an important part of really using your 100% of your full potential, and trying to have the maximum expectation from ourselves. And one question was on what suggestions do I have to integrate happiness and positive psychology into ALIAS research and educational programs. So firstly, I think schools and colleges must recognize happiness as a learning outcome. That when we talk about transformative learning that we want our students to have, that we also want to teach our students happiness skills, which means that perhaps having papers on positive psychology, or having centers on happiness on campus, where you invite different people to talk about. I had the idea of a course where students are taught to have some intervention which is life-changing for them. Like for instance, an instructor once told me that she taught a class where the students were asked not to use Facebook or any social networking website for 1 month. And I thought that was amazing, because having that kind of an experience, she said that really changed her students, even when they went back to social networking after that. And what could be done is that we can always have students take on those kinds of assignments which they've always wanted to do but never had the time to. Somebody wanted to write a book, or somebody wanted to start something. There could be courses which really helps people become much more confident in their individual lives, and do things which they've always dreamt to do. What do you think about the proposition that information, particularly in a technological society that makes information increasingly easy to access, is greater and greater volume contributes to unhappiness? And here I think it's the idea of information overload. So yes, I think if we have information overload, that does lead to that does clog up our minds. So when we think of the idea of big data now, and with all the talk on visualization, I think visualization is going to make us easier to synthesize and to connect the dots. So yes, more and more tools are needed, and ways to make sense of information. Otherwise, yes, there's a huge deluge of information, and we need to protect ourselves and to try to limit our exposure as well. So again, when we say trying to limit, it needs to be a personal choice and not something that is imposed by someone else. Are you aware of the Alliance for Positive Information Science started by Jarko Curry, which came out of the ASIS annual meeting in 2009? No, I'm not aware of that, but I'll surely check it out. I think that seems amazing. Is there a relationship between the amount of information one has with one's happiness? Does more information usually lead to more happiness, or are there cases where it just leads to information overload? So I think the key here is to recognize information as information, and trying not to affect it the way we allow it to affect ourselves. So in most of the time, we let information really affect us. When we read an email from someone, or when we get a letter, or when we hear someone say something to us, we let those words affect us. So even as we are letting ourselves be affected, I think having that sense of detachment from ourselves and looking at ourselves as an observer will help us see things from a distance. So I think it is really, so the way we treat information right now, we really let information affect us in many different ways. But if we are able to take on a more methodical view and trying to segregate information from ourselves, we'll be able to see that yes, information is coming our way, but we'll be able to see it as information and not something that we are allowing ourselves to be affected by it. So one hypothesis was that information overload leads to stress, and that stress leads to unhappiness. And I think that's true. And a lot of times stress happens when we are able to, when we are also living in the future. So if we are able to live in the present moment, we'll find that that we are able to cut down on the amount of stress that an average person goes through today. Because either when we live in the past, we are living in guilt a lot of times, or when we are living in the future, we are living in anxiety. So living in the present moment forces us to focus on only those things that we can change, and we are able to cut down on the amount of stress. Now, one question was if the 7 commandments have any religious influence on them. It could be that it is based on a number of books that I've read, but it's mostly life lessons, things that I've learned through experience. And most of the time, I think I do find the same thing resonated in different spiritual traditions and in different sayings and different things. But it is these are things that I've seen really work. So I think religion or anything is futile if it does not help you live an easier life. So if you are able to take anything from anywhere and apply it in our own lives, I think the application part is the most important. And I find that these themes are resonant in perhaps most of the religions of the world and most of the books, but we don't try to apply them in our daily lives. So I think the trying to apply is very important, and it's difficult for me as well. And a lot of times these commandments serve to remind me as well that I'm letting myself be affected by something. And I think having that realization really helps me at that moment. And does information really help us be happy, or is it just time consuming? So I don't know that. Now in this case, right, what I'm telling you right now or what you're hearing is information. And when you take this information and you are trying to make sense of it in your heads and forming it, either rejecting it or accepting it or connecting it with other life experiences, that is the process of sense making that's happening in your mind. And that is the process of turning this information into knowledge. So really what I'm giving you may or may not be time consuming, may be useful, may not be useful, but what is happening in your heads or in your minds, that is the most important part. And that is your perception of this is really going to decide whether you get happiness from it or not. And are there any texts you'd recommend to read more about positive psychology and its growing field of research? Yes, I do find that there are lots of books on happiness, and I even found an iPhone app on happiness. But I'm afraid that it might be becoming a fad. So in the sense that when you're going through a difficult time or when you have an assignment to do, at that point in time, if you just sit and meditate, or if you say that, oh, I should be happy, that is not going to make your life easier for you. We can become happier only by tackling our problems. So at that moment in time, sitting and doing your assignment is the most important thing, rather than talking about happiness at that moment. When somebody is going through a difficult time, we need to try and find solutions to help that person, and not really advise the person to be happy. So I think, and I find that I see some of that in the common literature these days, where people talk about talking about happiness, but not really addressing the issues that people face. I think solving problems is the key to being happy. And the other thing is that Maslow's need hierarchy is also wrong, and that many poor people in India are happy, and many poor people did not have much of material wealth. This again. This again is something which needs to be investigated, whether the poor are really happy or not. The poor might be content, but they do have big needs, and I think when people see that there is no way out of a given condition, at that moment people start accepting that life, and they have a sense of peace in what they have. But we can't really say that. Say that that it is happiness completely, but it is contentment, yes. And I think we should try and help improve the human condition wherever possible. And there was something important about. Can we talk about the relationship between sadness and information too? I think there's a lot of research on sadness and also on grieving that people feel when somebody loses a close one. And grieving has been found to be very important in the process of healing as well. So anything that helps you cope, if sadness helps you cope with the situation, then be sad, I think. And if grieving helps you cope, then do that. Anything that helps you. And I think it is not a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. It is more about accepting things that are happening in the life and asking ourselves a simple question. So whenever we have a problem, can we change that or not? And if it's something we can change, we change. And if something we cannot change, we accept. I think just being able to distinguish that, I think that is the most important thing. Can happiness be measured? So yes, I think that people are trying to come up with metrics and measures for happiness, and that's something which research and information science needs to do. So in one of the papers that I talked about, some people looked at as the number of times you smile as a measure of happiness. So smiles could be a measure of happiness, but again, before that we need to look at what is the definition of happiness, and based on that definition, then you can come up with various kinds of measures depending on the study that you're doing. So one was have a look at Levinas and his concept of the other. So okay, I'll take a look at that. And do we have the time to teach happiness itself in LIS curricula? Don't we have to teach so many other things or priorities? I think that's an important question. So yes, we do have to teach a lot of things, and whether happiness fits only within LIS or whether it's a wider field. But I find that we recognize the importance of research skills, we recognize the importance of management skills, of technology. So if we think that these things are important, I see that with a lot of information overload and people living individual lives, and with the amount of stress that is there in the profession, I think it's very important to recognize that people need to be given skills to cope with a lot of things in life, and happiness skills can really help in that. Getting information by different media is not affecting happiness. Yes, I think there is a lot of information we get through 24/7 news channels and media, and we should try, if as far as possible, either find a ways to limit our exposure to them, or if we are not able to, then shield ourselves from it mentally. And can information be a metric for measuring happiness? Now, I think information and happiness are related but different concepts. So information might affect happiness, but whether it's a measure of happiness or not is something that needs to be pondered. So it's 3 o'clock now. I think we'll stop here. But my email address is agarwal, my last name, @simmons.edu. So I think I'll just write it over here. So do please email me should you have questions. So thank you so much.